Hey everyone, so we're continuing down this thread. We talked about the Comintern, the Communist International, which was preceded by the Second International and the International Working Men's Association. However, the Second International was also succeeded not just by Comintern, but by the International Working Union of Socialist Parties, which eventually became the Labour and Socialist International. Comintern also became Cominform, so that's what I'm going to talk about on this episode. Again, we're just reading from Wikipedia. So the International Working Union of Socialist Parties, IWUSP, also known as the 2.5 International, or the Vienna International, German Internationale Arbeitsgemeinschaft Sozialistischer Partien, IASP, was a political international for the cooperation of socialist parties. History. The IWUSP was founded on February 27, 1921 at a conference in Vienna, Austria, by 10 parties including the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, the USPD, the French section of the Workers' International, the SFIO, the Independent Labour Party, the ILP, the Social Democratic Party of Switzerland, the SPS, Social Democratic Party of Austria, the SPO, and the Federation of Romanian Socialist Parties, the FPSR, created by splinter groups of the Socialist Party of Romania. In April 1921, it was joined by the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. The maximalist faction of the Italian Socialist Party, PSI, also joined. Members. The secretary of the IWUSP was the Austrian Friedrich Adler of the SPO. Other prominent members were Otto Bauer and Julius Martov. The group was heavily influenced by Austro-Marxism. It published Nachrichten der Internationalen, news of the IWUSP. Poale Zion, Labour Zionist leaders David Ben-Gurion and Shlomo Kaplansky were active in the movement behind the 2.5 International. Ideology. The founders of the IWUSP were parties that saw neither the reformist Second International nor the communist and pro-Soviet Third International as alternatives for affiliation. The IWUSP criticized the other two internationals for what it perceived to be dogmatism, and advocated that more consideration should be given to the particularities of the political situation in each country. It worked for the unification of the Second and Third Internationals. From April 2 to April 5, the Conference of the Three Internationals was held in Berlin with delegations from the three different international bodies to discuss a merger, but unity was not achieved and the Comintern withdrew from the talks. In Germany, September 24, 1922, the USPD, one of the main components of the IWUSP, merged with the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD, a member of the Bern International. Discouraged by the intransigent position of the Third International, the Second International and the IWUSP merged to form the Labour and Socialist International, LSI, at a joint congress in Hamburg in May 1923. Some, such as the FPSR, refused to join the new body. In the 1930s, a similar effort was made to create an international between the reformism of the Second and Stalinism of the Third, as the London Bureau of Left-Wing Socialist Parties, sometimes called the 3.5 International. It involved many of the same parties. So they were succeeded by the Labour and Socialist International, an international organization of socialist and labour parties active between 1923 and 1940. The group was established through a merger of the rival Vienna International and the former Second International based in London, and was the forerunner of the present-day Socialist International. The LSI had a history of rivalry with the Communist International Comintern, with which it competed over the leadership of the international socialist and labour movement. However, unlike the Comintern, the LSI maintained no direct control over the actions of its sections, being constituted as a federation of autonomous national parties. Founded by Arthur Henderson, 1863 to 1935, of the British Labour Party, he was chosen as the first chairman of the Executive Committee of the LSI in 1923. Despite the hostility expressed by the Communist International, the left wing of the Social Democratic movement sought an international union of the whole proletariat through 1922. This initiative finally came to a close at the end of the year with the convocation of the Fourth World Congress of the Comintern, which decisively rejected calls for a broad and inclusive international body. This rejection by the communist wing of the international socialist movement, left and centre and right, in the form of the Vienna International and the London International, respectively, to patch together their own joint international body. Planning for such a body began in January 1923, a month after the conclusion of the Comintern's Fourth World Congress, with the executive committees of the Vienna and London groups issuing a joint statement condemning the communist decision. The two executive committees subsequently issued a convention call for a unification congress in May. On May the 21st, 1923, some 620 delegates representing 41 socialist political parties in 30 countries was convened in Hamburg, Germany, to bring about the unification of the two internationals. A wide array of political tendencies were represented among these delegates, running the ideological gamut from activists in the left wing of the French section of the Workers' International, SFIO, and the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, USPD, to moderate reformists of the British Labour Party. The gathering was dominated by 80 delegates of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, SPD, including among its membership such esteemed leaders of the international socialist movement as Karl Kautsky, Eduard Bernstein, and Rudolf Hilferding. Other prominent figures in attendance included Arthur Henderson and Sidney Webb of the British Labour Party, Friedrich Adler and Otto Bauer, and Karl Renner of the Social Democratic Party of Austria, Emil van der Velde and Camille Huysmans of the Belgian Labour Party, and the émigré Russian Mensheviks Pavel Axelrod, Raphael Abramovich, and Fyodor Dan, among others. The Unity Congress voted to establish itself as a new international under the name Labour and Socialist International. In marked difference from the communist movement, no preconditions were established for admission, nor was any binding policy program adopted. Instead, the Hamburg Congress issued a manifesto stating that the new international must grow naturally from the process through which socialist parties get adapted to one another. Total agreement on fundamental principles was not expected at the moment of its birth, but the desire was voiced that establishment of the new international body would over time serve as one of the most important conditions for the harmonizing of their views. Structure. The LSI was to remain a federation of fully independent and autonomous political parties, groups which were freely allowed under organizational statutes to determine their own internal policies and programs. The organization was modelled upon the old Second International, with supreme authority vested in the International Congress, which could be convened at any time upon the demand of 10 or more affiliated parties, so long as these represented at least a quarter of the organization's voting strength. Governance between congresses was to be conducted by an executive committee with its participants elected by the member parties. The Executive Committee was given the power to elect its own chair and other officers, to determine the location for its central office, and to elect a 9-member bureau for prior consideration of matters of concern in advance of meetings of the full Executive Committee. The Executive Committee was additionally to establish a 6-member special committee of local members residing at or near the seat of the committee, who were to be responsible for supervising the work of the Executive and its officers and arranging meetings of the Bureau and the Executive Committee. The first Executive Committee elected by the 1923 Hamburg Congress included Arthur Henderson of the British Labour Party as chairman, Harry Gosling of the British Labour Party as treasurer, with the Austrian Friedrich Adler and the Englishman Tom Shaw joining as members of the group's secretariat. London was chosen as the seat of the Executive Committee. Development. The LSI functioned as a continuation of the Second International. The Social Democratic Party of Germany was the dominant party within the LSI. Response to Nazism. With the rise of Nazism in Europe, there was increased pressure on the LSI and Comintern to cooperate. On February 19, 1933, the LSI Bureau issued a call for joint action of the SPD and the Communist Party of Germany against Adolf Hitler's regime. The Comintern responded by stating that they were not convinced of the sincerity of the declaration. However, the Comintern did soon call its national sections to form united fronts together with social democratic parties locally. The LSI on its side did not accept the notion of local social democrats forming united fronts with the communist parties. However, as the Comintern adopted a more conciliatory tone, the resistance of the LSI against forming such united fronts on the national level softened. Within the LSI, a north-south cleavage emerged as the Mediterranean LSI parties built fronts with the communists, while the British and Scandinavian parties rejected the notion of cooperation with the communists. With the German party in disarray, the British and Scandinavians became more influential within the LSI. Thus, the space for socialist-communist cooperation decreased. On September 25, 1934, the Comintern executive issued a call for peace negotiations between the two internationals, but the LSI rejected the offer. After the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War, the LSI and the International Federation of Trade Unions launched an Aid for Spain campaign. The LSI-IFTU relief efforts were channeled through the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, PSOE, and Union General de Trabajadores, UGT. Colonial Question. Although the communists opposed colonialism, the LSI were generally supportive of colonialism. For example, the participation of the British Independent Labour Party in the communist-sponsored League Against Imperialism caused controversy within LSI, and the ILP was asked to break its ties with the League. However, the support for the LSI was for colonialism was not complete. Regarding the Rif War, the Second LSI Congress, held in Marseille, August 22 to 27, 1925, adopted a resolution calling for support of the independence of the Rif and urging the League of Nations to accept the Rif Republic as a member. And then there's a list of congresses. First in Hamburg, second in Marseille, third in Brussels, fourth in Vienna, and one in Paris. And list of members of the LSI: Argentina, Armenia, Austria, Belgium, British Guiana, Bulgaria, China, Social Democratic Party of China, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Free City of Danzig, Germany, Georgia, Great Britain, including the Labour Party, 1923 to 40, and the Independent Labour Party, 1923 to 33. Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Palestine, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Russia, including the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, the Mensheviks, and the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, Uruguay, United States Socialist Party of America, 1923 to 40, and Yugoslavia. So we're going to go to the successor of the LSI, which was the Socialist International, a worldwide organization of political parties which seek to establish democratic socialism. It consists mostly of democratic socialist, social democratic, and labor political parties, and other organizations. The Socialist International logo is a fist holding a rose. So formation was 3rd of June 1951, and they're still going. It's an international non-governmental organization. The purpose: to strengthen relations between the affiliated parties and to coordinate their political attitudes and activities. Location is London, United Kingdom. President is George Papandreou. Although formed in 1951 as a successor to the Labour and Socialist International, it has antecedents to the late 19th century. The organisation currently includes 147 member parties and organisations from over 100 countries. Its members have governed in many countries, including most of Europe. The current Secretary General of the SI is Luis Ayala, Chile, and the current President of the SI is the former Prime Minister of Greece, George Papandreou, both of whom were re-elected at the last SI Congress, held in Cartagena, Colombia in March 2017. History. First and Second Internationals, 1864 to 1916. The International Working Men's Association, also known as the First International, was the first international body to bring together organisations representing the working class. It was formed in London on 28th of September 1864 by socialist, communist and anarchist political groups and trade unions. Tensions between moderates and revolutionaries led to its dissolution in 1876 in Philadelphia. The Second International was formed in Paris on 14 July 1889 as an association of the socialist parties. Differences over World War I led to the Second International being dissolved in 1916. Labour and Socialist International, which we just talked about, 1919 to 1940. The International Socialist Commission, ISC, also known as the Bern International, was formed in February 1919 at a meeting in Bern by parties that wanted to resurrect the Second International. In March 1919, communist parties formed Comintern, brackets, the Third International, at a meeting in Moscow. Parties which did not want to be a part of the resurrected Second International, ISC or Comintern, formed the International Working Union of Socialist Parties, also known as Vienna International, Vienna Union 2.5 International, on 27 February 1921 at a conference in Vienna. The ISC and the IWUSP joined to form the Labour and Socialist International in May 1923 in Hamburg. The rise of Nazism and the start of World War II led to the dissolution of the LSI in 1940. Socialist International, 1951 to present. The Socialist International was formed in Frankfurt in July 1951 as a successor to the LSI. During the post-World War II period, the SI aided social democratic parties in re-establishing themselves when dictatorship gave way to democracy in Portugal 1974 and Spain 1975. Until its 1976 Geneva Congress, the SI had few members outside Europe and no formal involvement with Latin America. In the 1980s, most SI parties gave their backing to the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, FSLN, whose democratically elected left-wing government was subject to a campaign to overthrow it backed by the United States, which culminated in the Iran-Contra affair after the Reagan administration covertly continued U.S. support for the Contras after such support was banned by Congress. There's a picture of Willy Brandt with outgoing Secretary General Bernd Carlson and new Secretary General Pentti Vaananen at the Socialist International Congress in 1983. In the late 1970s and 80s, the SI had extensive contacts and discussion with two leading powers of the Cold War period, the United States and the Soviet Union, on issues concerning East-West relations and arms control. The SI supported détente and disarmament agreements, such as SALT II, START, and INF. They had several meetings and discussions in Washington, D.C. with President Jimmy Carter and Vice President George Bush, and in Moscow with Secretaries General Leonid Brezhnev and Mikhail Gorbachev. The SI's delegations to these discussions were led by the Finnish Prime Minister Kalevi Sorsa. Since then, the SI has admitted as members an increasing number of parties and organizations from Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. See below for current list. Following the Tunisian Revolution, the Constitutional Democratic Rally was expelled from the SI in January 2011. Later that month, the Egyptian National Democratic Party was also expelled, and as a result of the 2010 to 2011 Ivorian crisis, the Ivorian Popular Front was expelled in March 2011. In accordance with Section 7.1 of the Statutes of the Socialist International, these decisions were approved at the subsequent SI Congress in Cape Town in 2012, in line with Section 5.1.3 of the statutes. Progressive Alliance 2013. On 22nd of May 2013, the SPD, along with some other current and former member parties of the SI, founded a rival international network of social democratic parties known as the Progressive Alliance, citing their perceived undemocratic and outmoded nature of the SI, as well as the Socialist International's admittance and continuing inclusion of undemocratic political movements into the organization. Relationship with Latin America. For a long time, the Socialist International remained distant from Latin America, considering the region as a zone of influence of the United States. For example, it does not denounce the coup d'etat against Socialist President Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954, or the invasion of the Dominican Republic by the United States in 1965. It was not until the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat that we discovered a world we did not know, explains Antoine Blanca, a diplomat for the French PS. According to him, solidarity with the Chilean left was the first challenge worthy of the name against Washington of an international which until then had done nothing to appear subject to American strategy and NATO. Subsequently, notably under the leadership of François Mitterrand and SI supporters in the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and other movements in El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras in their struggle against US-supported dictatorships. In the 90s, it was joined by non-socialist parties that took note of the economic power of the European countries governed or to be governed by their partners across the Atlantic and calculated the benefits they could derive from it. During this period, the Socialist International works in a clientist way. Some parties come here to rub shoulders with Europeans as if they were in the upper class, says Porfirio Munoz Ledo, one of the representatives of the Party of the Democratic Revolution in Mexico, at the SI. It is home to the very centrist Argentinian Radical Civic Union, UCR, the Mexican Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI, which was not very democratically in power for 70 years, the Colombian Liberal Party, under whose governments the left-wing formation Patriotic Union 86 to 90 was exterminated, introduced a neoliberal model 1990 to 94, and to which, until 2002, Alvaro Uribe will belong. In the following decade, many left-wing parties that came to power in Brazil, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, and El Salvador preferred to keep their distance from the SI. Presidents, honorary presidents, and secretaries general. Morgan Phillips, UK, 51 to 57. Alsing Anderson, Denmark. Erich Ollenhauer, West Germany. Bruno Pitterman, Austria. Willy Brandt, West Germany. Pierre Mauroy, France. Antonio Guterres, Portugal. George Papandreou, Greece, 2006 to present. Honorary presidents: Pierre Mauroy, Mustafa Ben Jafar, Tunisia. Leonel Brizola, Brazil. Ruben Berrios, Puerto Rico. Philippe Bousquin, Belgium. Cuauhtemoc Cardenas, Mexico. Mohamed El Yazgi, Morocco. Alan Garcia, Peru. Anita Gradin, Sweden. Elazar Granot, Israel. Taja Halonen, Finland. Mahamadou Issoufou, Niger. Anke Jorgensen, Denmark. Lionel Jospin, France. Neil Kinnock, Great Britain. Horacio Serpa, Colombia. Enrique Silva Sima, Chile. Mario Suarez, Portugal. Hans-Joachim Vogel, Germany. Secretaries General: Julius Brenthal, Jan Bratoy, Albert Carthy, Britain. Hans Janix, Czech. Bernd Carlson, Pentti Vananen, and Louis Ayala. So they've had multiple summits, and they've got lots of members all listed here. I'm not going to go through them, but it looks like most countries. And then consultative party countries and observer parties. Former members. Fraternal organizations: International Falcon Movement, Socialist Education International, International Union of Socialist Youth, Socialist International Women. Associated organizations: International Federation of the Socialist and Democratic Press, International Jewish Labour Bund, International Labour Sports Confederation, International League of Religious Socialists, International Social Democratic Union for Education, Labour Zionism, National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, Party of European Socialists, and the Social Democratic Group of the Latin American Parliament. So I wanted to go now to the successor to Comintern, which is called Cominform. The Information Bureau of the Communist and Workers' Parties, commonly known as Cominform, was the official central organization of the international communist movement from 1947 to 1956. Cominform was a supranational alliance of Marxist-Leninist communist parties in Europe to coordinate their activity under the direction of the Soviet Union during the early Cold War. Cominform became de facto inactive in Soviet affairs from 1950 and dissolved during de-Stalinization in 1956. Ideology: Communism, Marxism, Leninism, Stalinism. Overview. Establishment and purpose. The Information Bureau of the Communist and Workers' Parties was unofficially founded at a conference of Marxist-Leninist communist parties from across Europe in Szklarska Poręba, Poland in September 1947. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, called the conference in response to divergences among communist governments on whether or not to attend the Paris Conference on the Marshall Plan in July 1947. It was founded with 9 members: the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the Bulgarian Communist Party, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, the Hungarian Communist Party, the Polish Workers' Party, the Romanian Communist Party, the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, the French Communist Party, and the Italian Communist Party. The organization was commonly known as Cominform, an abbreviated form of the Communist Information Bureau, itself a shortened version of the official name. Cominform was officially established on 5th of October 1947 with the intended purpose of coordinating actions between European communist parties under the direction of the Soviet Union. Cominform was not intended to be a replacement or successor to the Comintern, the international organization that advocated world communism and dissolved in 1943 but was considered its spiritual successor. Cominform was not a world communist party and did not have subordinates or power, limiting itself to its newspaper for lasting peace, for people's democracy. Published in several languages and to one goal: to organize an exchange of experience and, where necessary, to coordinate the activity of the communist parties on the basis of mutual agreement. Cominform was to organize the propagation of communist interests and repel the expansion of anti-communism in the aftermath of World War II and the subsequent Cold War, dividing the world into imperialist and anti-imperialist factions. The French and Italian communist parties were specifically tasked by Cominform with the obstruction of the implementation of the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine in Western Europe. Expulsion of Yugoslavia. Cominform was initially located in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, but after the Tito-Stalin split expelled Yugoslavia from the group in June 1948. The seat was moved to Bucharest, Romania. Officially, Yugoslavia was expelled for Titoism based on accusations of deviating from Marxism, Leninism, and anti-Sovietism. In reality, Yugoslavia was considered to be heretical for resisting Soviet dominance in its affairs and integration into Eastern Bloc as a Soviet satellite state. One of the most decisive factors that led to the expulsion of Yugoslavia was their commitment to supporting communist insurgents in the Greek Civil War in violation of the percentages agreement between the Soviet Union and United Kingdom, and their decision to station troops in Albania. The expulsion of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia from Cominform initiated the Informbiro period in Yugoslavia's history. Cominform's newspaper was originally printed in Belgrade. It was moved to Bucharest after the expulsion of Yugoslavia. A vast array of articles was published, including some from the Canadian Communist Party. Dissolution. From 1950, Cominform became rapidly irrelevant after the victory of the People's Republic of China in the Chinese Civil War, weakened Europe as the center of communism. Cominform, composed of entirely European parties, was rendered largely useless in Soviet influence over the international communist movement. No attempts were made to reorganize Cominform, and its decline accelerated drastically after the death of Stalin in March 1953. Meanwhile, the Soviets had gradually replaced Cominform with more effective and specialized organizations to exert their influence, such as Council for Mutual Economic Assistance in 1949 and the Warsaw Pact in 1955. Cominform was officially dissolved on 17 April 1956, in a decision by the Central Committee of the CPSU, prompted by the Soviet rapprochement with Yugoslavia and the de-Stalinization process following the rise of Nikita Khrushchev as Stalin's successor. There are 4 recorded meetings of the Cominform before 1956. The first was the founding meeting in Poland, 47 members present for the first meeting, etc. The second meeting occurred in Yugoslavia in 48. During this meeting, a permanent editorial board was chosen for the newspaper. This editorial board was under the leadership of Yugoslav National P. Udin. He was succeeded by USSR National M. Mitin. After the Yugoslav expulsion, a third meeting occurred in Romania in June 1948. This resulted in the expulsion of the Yugoslav Communist Party. Lastly, the fourth meeting was held in Hungary in November 1949. So member parties: Party of Labour of Albania, Bulgarian Communist Party, Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, French Communist Party, Socialist Unity Party of Germany, Hungarian Communist Party, Italian Communist Party, Communist Party of Netherlands, Polish Workers' Party, Romanian Workers' Party, Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Communist Party of Yugoslavia, Communist Party of the Free Territory of Trieste. So what is a Communist Party? It's a political party that seeks to realize the social and economic goals of communism through revolution and the establishment of a strong state. The term Communist Party was popularized by the title of the Manifesto of the Communist Party 1848 by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels as a vanguard party. The Communist Party guides the political education and development of the working class, proletariat. As the ruling party, the Communist Party exercises power through the dictatorship of the proletariat. Vladimir Lenin developed the idea of the Communist Party as the Revolutionary Vanguard when social democracy in Imperial Russia was divided into ideologically opposed factions. The Bolshevik faction of the majority and the Menshevik faction of the minority. To be politically effective, Lenin proposed a small vanguard party managed with democratic centralism, which allowed centralized command of a disciplined cadre of professional revolutionaries. Once the policy was agreed upon, realizing political goals required every Bolshevik's total commitment to the agreed-upon policy. In contrast, the Menshevik faction included Leon Trotsky, who emphasized that the party should not neglect the importance of mass populations in realizing a communist revolution. In the course of the revolution, the Bolshevik Party, which became the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, assumed government power in Russia after the October Revolution in 1917, with the creation of the Socialist International, Comintern, in 1919. The concept of the Communist Party leadership was adopted by many revolutionary parties worldwide in an effort to standardize the international communist movement ideologically and maintain central control of the member parties. The Comintern required that parties identify as a communist party. Under the leadership of the CPSU, the interpretations of orthodox Marxism were applied to Russia and led to the Leninist and Marxist-Leninist political parties throughout the world. After the death of Lenin, the Comintern's official interpretation of Leninism was the book Foundations of Leninism by Joseph Stalin. Mass organizations. As the membership of a communist party was to be limited to active cadres in Lenin's theory, there was a need for networks of separate organizations to mobilize mass support for the party. Typically, communist parties built up various front organizations, whose membership was often open to non-communists. In many countries, the single most important front organization of the communist parties was its youth wing. During the time of the Communist International, the youth leagues were explicit communist organizations using the name Young Communist League. Later, the Youth League concept was broadened in many countries and names like Democratic Youth League were adopted. Some trade unions and students, women's grifters, peasants, and cultural organizations have been connected to communist parties. Traditionally, these mass organizations were often politically subordinated to the political leadership of the party. After the fall of the Communist Party regimes in the 1990s, mass organizations sometimes outlived their Communist Party founders. At the international level, the Communist International organized various international front organizations, linking national mass organizations with each other, such as the Young Communist International, Profintern, Crestintern, International Red Aid, Sportintern, etc. Many of these organizations were disbanded after the dissolution of the Communist International. After the Second World War, new international coordination bodies were created, such as the World Federation of Democratic Youth, International Union of Students, World Federation of Trade Unions, Women's International Democratic Federation, and the World Peace Council. The Soviet Union unified many of the Comintern's original goals among its East European allies under the aegis of a new organization, the Cominform. Historically, in countries where communist parties were struggling to attain state power, the formation of wartime alliances with non-communist parties and wartime groups was enacted, such as the National Liberation Front of Albania. Upon attaining state power, these fronts were often transformed into nominal and usually electoral national or fatherland fronts in which non-communist parties and organizations were given token representation, a practice known as bloc party. The most popular examples of these being the National Front of East Germany as a historical example, and the United Front of the People's Republic of China as a modern-day example. Other times the formation of such fronts were undertaken without the participation of other parties, such as the Socialist Alliance of Working People of Yugoslavia and the National Front of Afghanistan. Though the purpose was the same, to promote Communist Party line to generally non-communist audiences and to mobilize them to carry out tasks within the country under the aegis of the front. Recent scholarship has developed the comparative political study of global communist parties by examining similarities and differences across historic geographies. In particular, the rise of revolutionary parties, their spread internationally, the appearance of charismatic revolutionary leaders, and their ultimate demise during the decline and fall of the communist parties worldwide have all been the subject of investigation. A uniform naming scheme for communist parties was adopted by the Communist International. All parties were required to use the name Communist Party of (name of country), resulting in separate communist parties in some countries operating using largely homonymous party names, e.g. in India. Today there are a few cases where the original sections of the Communist International have retained those names, but throughout the 20th century many parties changed their names. Common causes for these shifts in naming were either moves to avoid state repression or as measures to generate greater acceptance by local populations. An important example of the latter was the renaming of many Eastern European communist parties after the Second World War, sometimes as a result of mergers with the local social democratic and democratic socialist parties. New names in the post-war era included Socialist Party, Socialist Unity Party, People's or Popular Party, Workers' Party, and Party of Labour. The naming conventions of communist parties became more diverse as the international communist movement was fragmented due to the Sino-Soviet split in the 1960s. Those who sided with China and Albania in their criticism of the Soviet leadership often added words like revolutionary or Marxist-Leninist to distinguish themselves from the pro-Soviet parties. Membership. In 1985, approximately 38% of the world's population lived under communist governments, 1.67 billion out of 4.4 billion. The CPSU International Department officially recognized 95 ruling and non-ruling communist parties. Overall, if one includes the 107 parties with significant memberships, there were approximately 82 million Communist Party members worldwide. Given its worldwide representation, the Communist Party may be counted as the principal challenger to the influence of liberal democratic catch-all parties in the 20th century. However, in the capitalist counter-revolutions of 1989 to 1991 in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, most of these parties either disappeared or were renamed and adopted different goals than their predecessors. In the 21st century, only 4 ruling parties on the national level still describe themselves as Marxist-Leninist parties. The Chinese Communist Party, the Cuban Communist Party, the Communist Party of Vietnam, and the Lao People's Revolutionary Party. As of 2017, the Chinese Communist Party was the world's largest political party, holding nearly 89.45 million. Views. Although the historical importance of communist parties is widely accepted, their activities and functions have been interpreted in different ways. One approach, sometimes known as the totalitarian school of communist studies, has implicitly treated all communist parties as the same types of organizations. Scholars such as Zbigniew Brzezinski and Francois Fouret have relied upon conceptions of the party emphasizing centralized control, a top-down hierarchical structure, ideological rigidity, and strict party discipline. In contrast, other studies have emphasized the differences among communist parties. Multi-party studies, such as those by Robert C. Tucker and A. James McAdams, have emphasized the differences in both these parties, organizational structure, and their use of Marxist and Leninist ideas to justify their policies. Another important question is why communist parties were able to rule for as long as they did. Some scholars have depicted these parties as fatally, from their inception, and only remained in power. There's some words missing. So, some scholars have depicted these parties as fatally flawed from their inception and only remained in power because their leaders were willing to use their monopoly of power to crush all forms of opposition. In contrast, other studies have emphasized these parties' ability to adapt their policies to changing times and circumstances. So that is what a Communist Party is.